Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Programs broadcast. Today is Thursday, February 18th, 2021. For those of you who might be new to the broadcast, this is a live question and answer. So any question, any topic you want me to speak about as it relates to Evoke Therapy Intensives, your marriage, co-parenting, your other children. If you are a family member, a friend or a family member of an Evoke client, you can specify that, and I'll be sure to answer the question in a way that speaks hopefully to you. And if you're younger than an adult, that's really helpful for me. So put your age if you're under 20. That's really helpful. So with that, I'm going to get to the three submitted questions, pre-submitted questions, and then you can pass on questions or topics anytime to Malia. She'll gather those and then pass those on to me when there's time in the broadcast. So here is the first question. The first question says, our son will be leaving Evoke soon for his therapeutic boarding school. This has been a difficult decision for us, and our son is deeply disappointed that he can't come home to show us how much he's learned from Evoke. How can we best support our son and convey to him that this is indeed the best decision for his future? Billy and I were talking about this before we brought you all into the audience, to the room. And she was asking me, have you already seen this question? Have you already asked this question? I said, it sounds familiar, but this is one of those questions that I could be asked over and over again. So, and it's one question that I get asked so often that I think it would be relevant to tonight's broadcast. The first thing I will say, this is probably the most fundamental thing about this question, is that it's really not within the realm of your responsibility, your duty, your obligation to explain or to convince him that it's the best decision for his future. That's a really, really important point. You can one time, maybe two, talk about your reasonings and talk about your belief, but the idea of trying to convey to him, as this question says, of trying to convey that this is the best thing for his future, it really suggests that if you can convince him, although it says convey, it really suggests that if you can convince him, if you can get him to accept it, then he won't be angry or sad or frustrated or disappointed. That he won't have those feelings towards you. But it's almost more important that he has those feelings. The irony of therapy, especially the kind of therapy we do, is that you send your child here for the symptoms, right? The behaviors, and we go to, and all programs do this. Hopefully, the good ones do. We go to the source, which is the pain, the sadness, the fear, the anxiety, the shame, the feeling, and we ask them to express that as often as possible. And sometimes they express it in a really sloppy, immature way. Sometimes it takes a while for them to develop the skill set. But part of our job as people, family members, loved ones, spouses, part of our job is to be able to hear people that we care about when they don't say it perfect. Now, I'm not suggesting that you become a doormat. I'm not suggesting that you have no boundaries. I'm careful to point this out anytime I talk about this, that you are allowed to say, here's what I can and can't tolerate. Here's what I will and won't do. Even as that relates to listening. That, in fact, it's critical that you have yourself, a sense of self, a strong sense of self, and your limits, a sense of your limits. That's the foundation. That's the beginning. But past that, it's really about giving children, giving anybody that you care about, a space for them to be able to express their pain, their disappointment, their sadness, their frustration, their fear, their shame. And if you can be that container, if it doesn't take something out of you that's too much, then you get to be a part of it. You get to be a part of the healing. And they learn that you're a safe person. So it's so tempting. I'm as guilty as any of you at trying to convince my children. I just want to make this point right now. Everything that I know about, the themes that I repeat are the ones that I've struggled with. So let's just be clear about that. It's very tempting, and I've been tempted many times to try to convince my children. I have the gift of gab. I'm a good lecturer. I'm a good teacher. I'm educated. I'm wonderful at analogies and metaphors. I'm a decent storyteller. And I have employed all of those skills to try to control, it's really control, to control my children. When in reality, the response is to say, here's my best guess. It's not the words you say, it's the way of being. So just hear these words as more of a way of being than actual literal words that you say. Oftentimes, the words are very, very sparse, very, very few. But you're saying, here's my best guess. I don't know for sure what's the best thing, but based on all that I've done and what I feel, this is my best guess. And if it's the wrong decision, I'm sorry. And if you're hurt or upset by it, I'm genuinely sorry about that also. And you get to tell me about it. But you all know this. You just because you can't figure out the absolute without a shadow of doubt, the right decision that's going to guarantee the outcome that you want, just because you can't do that, you can't stay frozen, right? You have to make decisions one way or the other. So the process of setting boundaries in your life with your spouse, with your friends, with the family you grew up with, if you're still in relationships with them, with the family that you've created, which is this context often, your job is to show up and be a self and to take courageous steps to tell the truth about your boundaries, your limits, what you can and can't do, and then to listen to people be upset with you as much as you can without it taking something out of you. The second thing I'll say, and this actually reminds me of that I probably did address this question previously, is that the way that he shows you that he got out of Evoke is he expresses himself honestly and sincerely and courageously about his feelings, but he accepts the boundary. I used to always say to my students when they were leaving Evoke, I would say, your goal when you drop when your parents drop you off at your therapeutic boarding school is to make them doubt the decision based on your behavior. But if they drop you off thinking about feeling like this interim step, this transport situation was a disaster and that you have regressed backwards, if that's where they get to, then you haven't done your job. You're not showing them what you think you've accomplished here. A simple adage that I have used with adolescents is if you can deal with a yes, as you suggest, if you can deal with a yes, that means coming home, then you can handle a no. And the way that you demonstrate to your parents your ability, your growth is to express yourself honestly and assertively and genuinely, and then respect the boundaries. And even though going on to a therapeutic boarding school or coming to Evoke, that's a big, big, big boundary. It's come on the heels of a series of examples, I'm sure, where boundaries have not been so easy for you to respect. So there's more to it. It's more complicated than that, but those are some of the concepts that come out in that question. Someone writes, my husband and I have been deep diving into changing our own behaviors and have been modeling this in the way we communicate with our son while he has been at Wilderness and now a residential treatment center. We have been empathic. We have been empathic, validating, and reflective listening. Now our son is suspicious. He feels like we are fake and actually told us he prefers the old us when we were more authoritarian in lecturing. He added that inasmuch as he hates the lectures in the moment, he knows we are right later on. Is our son just being resistant or fearful to change and not used to our new way of communicating? Advice on how to address this with our son so that it doesn't come across as being sincere. You know, again, similar to the last question, let me start at the very end. You cannot control how he takes it. You can listen to that. You can allow that to inform you, right? That's what we do with our children. But ultimately, you can't control how he takes it. I say it in the audacity to be you. You can love your child but you can't make them feel loved. And it's imperative that you do work around what loving somebody is so that you're doing it honestly, authentically, and courageously, genuinely. So that's the first kind of concept in this question. But the second thing is that between me and you have the right to do it differently. You have the right to grow. You have the right to make a shift. It's going to sound different. I always use sports as an analogy. I'm not great at sports, but I love them growing up, love watching them. And in the times that my golf teacher, for example, gave me a new grip, or my tennis teacher gave me a new grip on the racket, it felt completely awkward, contrived, unnatural. Felt like I wouldn't have the accuracy or the power that I had prior when I had the grip that they didn't like. But I tried it because I'm there for the lesson. And after a while, it becomes second nature to me, and I become stronger and I become more accurate. Shifting and changing our skill set is going to be met with resistance. There's a part of the story, if I'm digging a little bit deeper into your question, my suspicion is that he likes the fight. And when you're not fighting with him, he's lost his leverage point. There used to be a sign up in the first wilderness program that I worked in before we started ours in 1996. And it said, arguing with a teenager is like wrestling with a pig in the mud. The problem is the teenager enjoys it. People, when you use, this is really important, I think fascinating actually. When you develop healthy boundaries and communication skills that come with it, you're going to be accused of not caring. You're going to be accused of being fake. You're going to be accused of abandonment and not loving, and the list goes on and on and on. Because that's what healthy boundaries feel like to people that have been in a relationship with somebody with poor boundaries or an anxious attachment. Healthy boundaries and communication skills that go with them feel like abandonment and a lack of love to people who have previously experienced unhealthy boundaries or enmeshment or anxious attachment or codependency. So you can expect this kind of response. So I would be genuine. I would listen to him. I wouldn't try to talk him out of it. I remember one time many years ago, my son, my oldest, said to me, "You don't talk to me like a therapist." And I was talking to my therapist about it, and she said, "How are you going to not sound like a therapist? You're a therapist." And it wasn't what I was saying. She was like, "It's just who you are." So my deepest suspicion is he's lost his leverage and his ability to fight. And with you out of the fight, he's lost kind of that control in the relationship. Somebody writes, how do I help my 40-year-old son to move on? Or is it my role to give him unconditional love with the understanding that his serenity is his responsibility? Then the question is, does he know how to achieve serenity? What if his anger and depression keep him stuck, i.e. paralyze him? That's a good question. I'm actually trying to find a different presentation. Well, I'll just have to go without the graphics. Malia, if you'll just note this moment in the broadcast, so I can go back and edit it out when I change it into a podcast. That's a very complex question. Very complex. Your first job is to be you. And that's a life's work. To be your deepest, most authentic self. Imperfect, flawed, messy, but you, and always growing and always learning and always evolving. That's your first job. As I see it, your second job is to love and care for the people that you're close to. And then it extends out from there. I think that's a pretty unarguable stance that I've just taken. I think I don't know what, there's too much in your question about what you can do to make him feel or be or think or behave differently. That's the response to this. Remember, parenting isn't about healthy, intentional, heroic parenting isn't about figuring out the right buttons to push to manipulate people. It's about figuring out the right way to be with somebody. We're not trying to get you, all of us, ideally, we're not trying to get your children to behave well. We're not trying to get them to do the things that you want them to do. That would be a disaster, right? We want your children to become themselves and to be bigger than you, right? To expand on the lessons and the wisdom that you have and to become something more. So the job is to be you. And so I was going to pull up the drawing that I had from the other night that everybody asks the question of therapists and others who are in a role to teach or to mentor. They ask the question, what should I do? And that's not the correct place to start. I accept that as a ticket for entry into this discussion because that's what I do for a living, right? I let you ask me the question and I kind of show you how there's something that precedes it. So the question isn't really what should we do? The question is, who am I? Who am I? What's my role? What's my place? What does it mean to be me, a person? I talk about that a lot lately. We're learning to become people. We're learning to become a human. And then what's my relationship to my child in this case and their issues or their problems? How does my mental illness, my baggage play into that? My health play into that? My background, the lessons from my family of origin, how does that play into that? The culture, so forth and so on. And then out of those questions, who am I? What's my relationship to my child? Or in other words, what does it mean to have a healthy relationship with another human being that I'm close to? Out of that comes the decisions, the boundaries, the limits, and the consequences. But most people want to skip self and those foundational awareness, and they want to get to what do I do? Let me say it to you this way. This is important. I've shared this quote with you other times, but I want to revisit it because I've been thinking about it the last 2 days. Albert Einstein said something like this. I've seen it translated a couple of different ways, so maybe he said it in German and people are just taking liberties. But essentially, it's this. You cannot solve the problem from the same level of consciousness in which it was created. And that level of consciousness is, what should I do? And how can I get the outcome that I want? What we're doing in these podcasts, these webinars, what we're doing at Evoke Therapy, what I'm doing in my books, is I'm saying we're trying to move you to a higher level of consciousness where those old questions don't even make sense anymore. And where the way of being, the way of thinking, the way of relating is just from a different place. You guys, I'm not holding back on advice because I want to string you along. I'm not holding back on solutions because I want you to attend another webinar or listen to another free podcast or buy my book for $15. I'm telling you, it's really not the answer. It's not the question. People who know what I'm talking about are people in recovery from Al-Anon, people who have been to therapy and who have done enough work that they realize that so many things that they were taught that are present in our culture, the dominant culture, don't make any sense. And that to be a person and to love somebody is they were never taught it. I was talking to somebody just yesterday. My professors didn't teach me. None of them taught me any of this that I'm describing to you. None of them. And I have a PhD. There was one, I think she tried, but I probably couldn't hear it. This is a transformation. It's such a shift. It's more than the addition of skills. It's more than understanding enmeshment. It's learning. You know, the podcast that's coming to my mind, two come to my mind is one is learning what it means to be a good parent. I did a podcast on that, and the narcissistic wound. It's really deeper and bigger than what do I do? What are the steps? How can I get them to do this? How can I convince them of this? How much should I allow them to be on social media? Should I let them go out with friends? Should I drug test them after Evoke? Should I let them live at home after they're... I understand that you want those questions, and please keep asking them when you want to, because then we can talk about what's beneath it, what's behind it. When I wrote The Journey of the Heroic Parent, that was the idea. I said, I don't need a parenting book that gives you a formula for raising good children, because there's no such thing. It's about learning to think differently, learning to transform your consciousness to a new level. And I'm not talking about some kind of new age, airy fairy thing. I'm talking about the people that are in Al-Anon, who have long-term recovery under their belt. Al-Anon is a program, basically, I'm going to reword it, but for people that are trying to learn to be in unhealthy relationships because they were never taught how. Those folks get it. Someone says, advice for a child not wanting to come home to live with you after this time of the program? I guess if they're over 18, when my children turned 18, when I turned 18, I started paying rent to my mother, which made me want to get out of the house pretty quickly, because if I was paying rent at home, I'd rather have my own place. I won't go and tell you the whole story because I've told it so many times, but I'll tell you what my therapist told me is they need to get away from you as far as they can. I have allowed and encouraged, after I struggled with it initially, my children to move away, to go away, to figure themselves out in the world, to leave my context so they could find out what it was. I really try hard. I study hard. I'm not stupid when it comes to psychology and parenting skills, but I'm a mess. I'm a mess, just like every other human. And I want my children to go out there, and by being in another context, they discover the certain kind of mess and crazy that I and my wife are. And then they figure themselves out. I love them. I miss them. I enjoy all of my children's company. They've all, two for two, come home after moving away for college for years. One is at college right now. But that's okay. There's a saying in Buddhism that says, to grow up, you have to kill your parents. And I say to that, to grow up, you have to kill everybody. You have to kind of find yourself in this process. And of course, I'm speaking metaphorically. It's harsh language, but it's a complicated question in the abstract, because I don't know your child's age and development and kind of where you're at and how much support they need. All of those things play into it. You get to decide how much support financially you give to them, but in general, it's a good thing. And it's a gift that you give to them because you're helping them to grow up by getting away from you. Thank you for the links, Malia. Someone writes, my son is at Evoke 4 weeks. Is it necessary to move to a different state for my son to not connect with his drug buddies? Not necessarily. Not at all. I wouldn't recommend that at all. They'll find them in 15 minutes at their new school. Moving to a new school or new place helps those who really, really, really want help, but it never makes a difference if somebody's anywhere near ambivalent, speaking of the child. So no. And I think also it's a tremendous sacrifice for families. And yeah, you know, it doesn't make a difference, really. Doesn't make a difference unless the child is asking for it and really motivated. If they want to get away. But in general, no. Someone says, can you share some thoughts on connecting with an emotionally avoidant kid? Our son has been at a therapeutic boarding school for about 5 months. After about 12 weeks in wilderness, we have heard you speak about trying to pull the wall down before he is ready, and yet we are longing for more connection. I don't know what his neurology is like. I don't know if he's neurologically atypical, on the spectrum. I don't know. You can let me know, but You're not going to find the connection there with that. You're not going to find the connection with somebody who has that difference in cognitive structure. That's first and foremost. Um, I, I don't know what to tell you except for I don't know if he's trying to punish you for all of this. That could be part of it. If he's withdrawing, I don't know if he feels smothered by you or controlled by you. It's really important that we understand that that I'm gonna say this. I hope this comes out okay because I'm just thinking about. I think it's a parent's job to support the kid where they need to go, even if that includes away. I think. I always say this that if my adult children said to me that having you in my life, Dad, is toxic or harmful or detrimental, I would support them 10 times out of 10 at getting away from me. I would do that with my clients that are adults. If they said being around my spouse or being around my parent is toxic, if they believed that, if that was their experience, I would say, sounds like it's really important for you to be away from them, right? So I don't know if there's a secondary gain in there, meaning that he's manipulating the relationship somehow, punishing you, manipulating you. I don't know. I don't know if he feels smothered by you, or doesn't know how to relate to you. So those are all interesting aspects of it. But in the end, it just goes to it's not their job to take care of us and to make us feel good. They do. We love them more than anyone on earth. They bring us as much joy as anything anybody on earth does. But it's not their job to make us happy. It's so um, for now, find that connection somewhere else. I hope that's okay to say. I think I find myself being really sensitive to this because if you were my client, I would just empathize with you and tell you how much I relate to you. So someone says this work that we do as parents to learn to take care of our trauma and not put it onto our children feels like it is hurting some relationships while improving others. And lately it feels frustrating, sad, and lonely. Is this to be expected? Thank you so much. Yes, it's a messy, messy path. And you're going to lose people. You will. You'll lose people sometimes forever, sometimes temporarily. There's no that's the thing is once you get raised to this new level of consciousness, you realize you have no control over people. You don't go out, you're not rude and abrupt and obnoxious, with the justification that you're just growing and going through your trauma. You don't try to do that. But yeah, there are losses. I mean, folks, that's why we behave the way we do is because we're afraid of abandonment. So we end up compromising parts of ourselves to keep people around. And we learned our parents first taught us what to get rid of so that we can be acceptable, and then we were raised with that, and then we attract people kind of like our parents, kind of at the same level of emotional maturity of our parents. There's a saying that I just remembered that says you becoming more emotionally mature will expose the emotional immaturity of your parents and those around you. So it's messy, it's scary. You need I believe that you need somebody that you trust, not just somebody that gives you advice, but somebody you trust is a little bit farther along the path to talk to kind of do this because it's really scary and confusing. And there are losses along the way. People get hurt and offended. People will accuse you of being selfish and unloving and crazy. I mean, it must be so. If you're moving to a new level of consciousness, everybody with which you've been interacting with is not going to celebrate you and applaud. You've gone off the deep end. You're insane. You're going to get that from your children, your family of origin for sure. But then all of a sudden, some people are going to get it. And then some people that you did in relationships with are going to be attracted to you. And then some people are going to fall off either by your choosing over time or immediately or by their choosing. So it's super, super, super hard. Somebody says, my teen is home after a year away. He is doing great, but my husband and I might kill each other. Why does this happen? Well, it's called triangulation. One answer, which is when we have a common enemy, that's not the right word, but common focus, we can put all our anxiety into that. But if that's removed, we have to deal with each other. So triangulation is the process of two people, typically parents, but it can be anybody, not even related. Two people expressing their angst or anxiety onto a third person. And if that person were to leave or in this case get healthier, you're gonna have to deal with each other more. So I laugh. It's normal. It by the book, it's predictable. By the book, it actually says this should happen. I think that's a little bit harsh because I think we're a little bit more complex and diverse than that. But by the book, it said this should happen. It says this should happen. So be kind to yourself. Try to be kind to each other. Get help. Get help. Make sure that I think the one of the disasters of our program, one of the worst outcomes is at Evoke that can happen. It's not the worst, but one of the worst outcomes at Evoke is that a kid gets better. And then the parents think that the work is done. The worst outcome is that the kid doesn't get better and suffers in pain or his or her life is compromised, right? That's the worst outcome. But the second worst outcome is that a kid gets better. And the parents think the work is done, think there's no more work to do. I've seen it hundreds of times. Up close. Keep doing your work. You have plenty of material there to work on. Plenty of mental health, mental illness issues to work on. Work on that. It's never done. I've talked to children who are thriving and doing well after Evoke. 1, 2, 5, 10 years later. Many, many of them who said, I'm doing better. They kind of tell me the story, but they say my parents are the same. I've talked and seen and interacted with those parents in similar situations. So yeah, it's predictable. It's hard. Be kind to yourselves, to each other, and do your work. Do your work. Someone writes, we felt wilderness was a pivotal and transformative time for our teen. Only now he admits that he snowed everyone there just to get through it. Now it makes me wonder if this is true and the authentic side we saw in wilderness was all fake. Yeah, I've had kids tell me that before. It's a great way not to be accountable. One of the greatest lies that somebody will say is, I was lying before, but now I'm not. So my answer to that is I would underreact to that. I would be curious. It's most likely manipulative. It's another way of saying you wasted your time. There's so much in there. I've heard that phrasing and that story so many times. I remember one time I looked at the student and I said, you're not that good of an actor. Those things were authentic and real. You just can't keep it up, or you don't want to be accountable for the things that you said, the things you felt, the things you wrote back then. So I'm skeptical. When children tell me they're better, I don't believe them. When they tell me they're not growing at all or not learning anything, I don't believe them. Our job is to kind of to see things from the 10,000 foot perspective. I'm skeptical and suspicious of that because I think it has other things in it. It's supposed to trigger you. Supposed to trigger you. And my personal experiences, I've heard people say that, students say that, and it's I never believe them anyway. I don't believe I don't believe you're fixed. I don't believe I'm fixed. Why would I believe a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 14-year-old? Why would I believe they're fixed and cured and that every insight that they have? I don't believe myself when I have an insight, right? I can have the most wonderful insight, but I got work to do tomorrow. I got to work. It still is work. When I signed up for the marathons that I ran, that's the easy part. Being motivated and excited. The hard part was a Tuesday morning at 5 a.m. at the high school track in the sleet by myself. And if I don't wake up and I don't go and I don't train, I don't say I wasn't sincere when I signed up for the marathon. I thought I was sincere. It felt exciting. But the real question is, does it have legs? Can it be sustained? And I think there are many reasons why students say that. And I think one of the reasons that they say that is they can't sustain it. Someone says, my 22-year-old returned from residential treatment center about 6 weeks ago. His first couple of days, he lived with me, and he seemed in a better place mentally and emotionally. Then his mother, and I sat down to drop a contract for living at home. He had a meltdown, sobbing inconsolably. Since then, when he's with me, he says he stays in bed until the afternoon and does not even do the most basic, simple household tasks I ask him to do. One of the comments his mother made was something to the point of, I can babysit him when she's not on the road. She works from home. Do I need to give my son an ultimatum, either take responsibility for taking his medications, practicing personal hygiene, and contribute to the taking care of our home, or get out? It's a big, big question. I don't know. But you have a right to have certain expectations if you're supporting him in your home. And I would want to be a part of a dynamic in the family where there's progress happening. I can't answer the question. Some of these questions are so big that there's life and death implications. And me answering a question, even if you were my client and I knew you, asking that question is too great of a burden for any therapist to bear. And if one answers it, walk away. If a therapist answers that question, walk away and get a new therapist, because the risks are too great. And so, get into therapy for all of you. Get into therapy, get into codependency work, figure out your relationship with your child, figure out where your boundaries feel right, they're not controlling, figure out how to hold compassion and empathy and non-judgment without it being something that compromises your boundaries. Does that make sense? Find a way to be empathic, compassionate, and non-judgmental without those feelings compromising who you are. It's complex. Life is hard. Parenting is the hardest thing in the world. You and I will fail at parenting more than any other thing that we do in our lives that we care about, by far. By far. We will have failures by the number more than anything else we care about, and it's not even close, except for maybe marriage. So it's work. It's work. And if your children have mental illness or addiction issues, you have to do extra work. My belief is I like to do extra work anyway because children are so hard. Maybe I just did it, but that's why I've been in therapy for 22 years with this therapist and another 10 or so before that with other therapists. That's why I've been to Al-Anon, Codependence Anonymous. That's why I'm always trying to learn and to grow in this process, because it's you never arrive. It's really, really, really hard. So there's a dynamic there that's problematic for sure. And I think you can get out of it. And I think you have to move and press forward one way or the other, but get some help. Kind of figure out what your part in it is, and move from there. Someone writes, my son is almost 17, belongs to he's a third culture kid. I'm going to have a guest on very soon at Phil's request. I bet you're Phil's client. Belongs to a third culture kid. Very sensitive and emotional type. Always tests our love in dangerous ways. Suicide, self-harm. He just wants to know if we truly love him. Why? I suspect it's an attachment wound. I suspect that he's trying to get you to give him a feeling that's missing inside, right? It's I won't go so far as to say it's an attachment disorder, because I see everything through the lens of attachment, attachment wounds, attachment healing, attachments, healthy attachments. Everything is attachments to me, but it simply explained he has some attachment wounding. And he's trying to make you feel good inside. Um, he's trying to make him feel good inside by you, and it'll never end. It won't work, and so he's got to kind of unravel that attachment wound and heal it and work on it. Understand what it is. He's got to figure out why, with the help of the therapist, why he's trying to ask for something that he can never get enough of. And not in a bad way, not in a simple reframing way of making him, pathologizing him, but my work and the difference at Evoke, I hope, is that we don't try to tell you how to fix yourself first. We try to tell you why the broken parts make so much sense, and how the broken parts of you and me are related to our wounds, big and small, our trauma, big and small. They're there to kind of bring us back and understand them and heal them and feel them and deal with them and move through them. And that takes a long time. And we get, my all of my hope with all of my books, all of my podcasts, all of the webinars is not that we arrive, but that you get a hunger for your own work. That it's not a stigma or a shame or a blaming thing, but you realize that's what healthy people do is they go to therapy. It's the unhealthy ones that don't, right? Healthy people go to therapy. Healthy people work on themselves. Healthy people know that they're flawed and their poop stinks, and they work on it. Unhealthy people think they've got it figured out and they don't have any problems. They're they're the scary ones, right? You know some of them. All right, looks like I don't have any questions. Let me go over upcoming announcements, and if any questions come in, I'm happy to take them at the end. My books are available on Amazon. Most of you know that. Those of you that are listening, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You. I did The Audacity to Be You, the audio myself. You can go to Amazon or Audible for either one of those. If you want to do a deep dive in your own work, I cannot say this too emphatically. If you want to do a deep dive in your own work, do intensive work. Do therapy, but do an intensive work. Get yourself going. Get yourself realizing there's stuff there, and I got to work on it. The next one that has any spots available is March 17th through 21st. I'll be running that one. April 28th through May 2nd. Our intensives are attachment based. We use experiential therapy, but they're attachment based. We also have them online. There's a March 24th through 26th. It's half the cost, half the time. So if resources are an issue, they're amazing actually. Um, I didn't know. I didn't think when the pandemic broke out that they would be that good. In fact, our first one, we were kind of iffy about it. I didn't know if I was going to do, but I was pleasantly amazed. Finding You 2, if you've been to a Finding You 1, we have an in-person one coming up May 12th through 16th. We have pursuit trips, 3 to 30-day adventure trips for families or young adults. You can also use it for an in-between Evoke in the next program with our therapeutic staff. You can customize it. We have support groups for wilderness and intensives. So some of you just went to the wilderness one this evening. The next one is February 25th at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. And then for intensives is March 9th. All right. We ask all current parents to go to 6 12-step support groups. Any combination of Al-Anon, Codependence Anonymous, Families Anonymous, or Adult Children of Alcoholics. Don't get freaked out by that name. It's really just adult children of parents that were less than perfect. RefugeRecovery.org is a Buddhist-inspired option. And then the National Alliance on Mental Illness or NAMI.org is a great place to get classes and groups and information in your local area from the local chapter. Just go to NAMI.org. All of these broadcasts are available on your favorite podcast app. Just search Finding You in Evoke Therapy Podcast or go to soundcloud.com. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram using the handle @Evoke Therapy, or you can find @Evoke Therapy Intensives using that handle on Instagram. On Facebook, you can find us by searching Evoke Therapy Programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives. And of course, the Evoke blog has information up. The next one is supposed to be chapter 2 of the journey of the heroic parent. But like I said, I'm bringing on an expert in third culture kids because it's not my expertise. We're in discussion. She's going to be plugged in somewhere. So one of these is going to change here in the next few weeks. I'm getting her on as soon as she's able to be able to talk and teach about those for those of you that will be important and applicable to. So looks like there are no questions, Malia. Is that correct? I thought we were going to run out of time. Thanks for joining me this evening, folks. I hope this is a helpful point of contact. If you're listening on the podcast, like us, subscribe to us, share. We really appreciate it. We believe in this work. We believe it's a healing elixir for all of us, whether you have children in our program or not, that this is really universal work that we're all doing. And I get the joy of doing it with you now for the last 13 and a half years. So I'm grateful to be here talking to you tonight. Have a great evening. I'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.